Hey guys, this is John. Got a couple minutes on lunch. Wanted to share some practical field tips with you. So I've been running into a couple issues with thermostats, and some of them I've never seen before. So figured I'd share real quick while I got a minute on lunch. So I ran into 3 within the last week, and some of these error codes I've never seen before. So I dug into it and had to, figure out what exactly was going on. So the first one, I'm not sure what led up to it, but basically the stat was flashing the error log showed a 6834 error or a 6831 error. I've never seen those before. It's an MA signal reception error. And what that means is that the indoor unit is having a difficult time connecting and speaking and communicating with the thermostat, which is a simple MA controller. And so it could be a damaged thermostat wire, it could be interference, it could be a bad thermostat, it could be a bad board, it could be a whole bunch of different things. And the symptom is you power cycle it, and when those simple MAs start up, they flash an H0 or an HO, which I think stands for hold on, I'm not sure exactly, but it'll flash that while it establishes communication with the indoor unit. And this one would do that for 15-20 minutes until finally it ran out of time, and internally it said, okay, there's a problem, we're not establishing communication, and it would time out. And so, you have a punch list of things to check, and we had good connections, wire wasn't nicked, there was, no continuity problems, it wasn't run next to any high voltage. Everything looked good on the wiring side. And so before I started replacing stats or boards, I wanted to check a couple other things. On these simple MA controllers, there's some dip switches on the back. One of them has to do with how it's controlling, whether it's working with other stats or not, and 3 of them are for display. So on the display ones, you have one for Fahrenheit or Celsius. Now from the factory it's set to Celsius, so if you're in America or anywhere they're using Fahrenheit, you're going to want to switch it to Fahrenheit, otherwise leave that alone. They have one that is going to basically let you choose if you're going to display the room temperature. Now why would you do that? It's just so people aren't sitting there watching it being like, hey, it's a degree behind or whatever. And so this can actually help resolve customer complaints, people that just sit there and stare at the stat. If you flip this one off, or if you flip that dip switch, it gets rid of that and it just shows what the set point, or what the temperature set point is. And then one has to do with whether you display, I think it's single set point versus dual set point. So in auto motor is at 1 temperature or 2. But the one that was tripping it up, and this is the first dip switch number 1 on the back there, is whether this is a main or a sub thermostat. Now what's a sub thermostat? Now let's say you have a big haul and an 8-ton unit, let's say. You can have 3 stats in there, and okay, I checked, it's only 2 stats maximum. Sorry guys. And they can all be controlling that 8-ton. One will be making the decision, then I think it can average. It's not a very common application, but it can be done, and there's ways to do that. But if you're going to use multiple stats to control a group, you have to designate one as the main. Now in a 1-to-1 application, 1 thermostat to 1 indoor unit, the stat's always the main. I believe that's the default. And so what that means is that at some point the stat that was on there got flipped to sub, and so when it goes to establish communication with the indoor unit, it's waiting, I think it's trying to talk or wait for the main to start talking, and it never did, and so it would just error out eventually because it could never establish communications. And so literally the resolution to that was flipping the dip switch back to main, power cycling it, and then it established communication, went back to normal. Really weird issue. I think someone was messing with the stat or popped the thermostat on there when they that hadn't been set up correctly. Okay, so the second error, stat was flashing a 5101, which is a return error sensor fault. This is the error you'd get if, let's say, the return error sensor went bad. Now from the factory, these units, and this was again a ducted ceiling concealed style unit, and this is the error you'd get if the return air sensor went bad. From the factory, they control off the return air sensor. If you want to add a thermostat, you have to flip switch 1-1 to the on position, and then it will control off the thermostat. You can actually use a thermostat and control off the return air. You can do that as well. This unit was freshly installed. It was in the previous application. It was running off a remote return air sensor. So Mitsubishi makes an accessory which essentially plugs into the same port as the return air sensor, but it comes with like a 50-foot cable so you can mount it somewhere else. So it's kind of like a stat, but kind of not. But so they had used that. They had switched it back to a thermostat for this new installation. They had flipped the dip switch back, but they never plugged the return air sensor back in. So when it was reading that sensor, it saw OL for ohms, and it would error out. And the solution to that was to plug the return air sensor back in, power cycle, and it went back to normal. Error cleared. Third one was, again, another newly installed unit. We turned power on. The stat did not illuminate. And so we were thinking bad stat, but of course, before you start throwing parts at something, you want to check everything. So this had a new thermostat wire. It was, everything should have been good. We had these stats, the Simple MAs, are powered off of low DC signal, or low voltage DC signal from the indoor unit. We had the DC voltage at the unit. We did not have it at the stat. And so come to find out that we had a piece of insulation on the wire still. It hadn't been stripped properly. So we had lost the 20 volt DC or whatever it is to the stat, and it just didn't light up. And so we had tried swapping the face out, and it still didn't do it. And lo and behold, the solution was to turn it off, strip the insulation, correct the wire termination, power it on, and it went back to normal. So 3 thermostat issues, completely different situations. Parts used, 0. From what I've seen, the stats don't typically go bad. They can, but it's not really common. More often than not, something's not set up correctly, dip switches aren't configured correctly, or you've got just a bad connection. So do your due diligence when you're running into these issues. And stats aren't cheap, but you can get these units running more often than not just by checking everything that you need to check. So until next time, guys, my name is John, and this is VRF Viewpoint.